and welcome to my radio show. How you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Cool. You know, it's funny, everybody. Every year now, well, actually for the last 2 years since I moved out to California, I've seen Tim at the NAMM Show, and it's been great. It's like a homecoming, so it's very cool. So again, thanks for being here. I just have a few questions for you that I think are going to help the listeners of this show. So what are some of the best ways to start beginner improvisers in a school setting? You know, some folks start out with like teaching the blues scale. Others start off with, you know, learning chords. Others start off with major scales. What are some ideas that you have about that?
Well, one of the things that I always like to do, if I'm able to, with the student is something like a call and response. I always tell the teachers and the students, I learned to play jazz BA before Aebersold.
Okay.
And, like people say, 1800 BC. Well, I learned to play jazz in the 60s BA before Aebersold. So what it is I figured out is when I was a kid, I would pull things off of records, simple stuff like Song from My Father, pop tunes like The Philly Dog, horn parts from Sam and Dave things. They all were in the same mix. So what I'll do with a student is I'll tell them, let's take these two notes, because what I'm looking for is language. Okay? What's missing today in a lot of things is the authenticity of the language that's being presented. Since before I ever taught, was a player, and I still am, and I wasn't too convinced at a certain point about the educational stuff. When I was in the Harry James band, Harry actually had pointed it out to me that he said, because people would come up and ask me, and he said, you have a good way with teaching people things, for a lot of patience. So I took that as serious because he didn't beat around the bush at all. And so what I learned to do is I tell people, like, I'll take a student and I'll give them like a root and a flat third, right? And I'll play something to them and just say, like, right?
Got it.
Like, just get a groove, or just take a note, like I used to do with John LaPorta when I was a kid at Berkeley, and have them, or get that. Show them how to get a pocket with simple notes. Because what happens is, if I give them a scale, what's going to happen is the kids that are adept at flying up and down are going to fly up and down, but they're not going to be here. So I also tell them, there's another technique I use, and I like to not write a lot of this down.
Yeah.
Because they internalize it faster, just like a young student or an adult, or I would on the bandstand with somebody in playing a horn part with something simple, like a background lick when somebody's playing a blues solo or something, right?
Sure.
So what I'll do is I'll do a simple two-note thing, or I'll do a one-note thing, depends on their level. And you'd be surprised at what would happen with the students, because instead of saying, now this is what you want to do, and explaining to them something rhythmically, and you're going to lose them, man, because they're going to either be scared or the attention span's going to go cuckoo. So what you got to do is I'll sit there and I'll play like,
Yeah, cool.
Simple lines, nothing heavy. After a while, they'll start to embellish that by accident. I have a student at the house that I do that with. So what happens is, my motto is the simpler the better, and give them something that automatically cements into their chops. And as it cements into their chops, the ear, and also the language, because the language is what, in my humble opinion, as they say, is being missed today so much. Like you have to almost be coming from the bandstand to know what that language is. It's not something that, the more notes you give somebody, sometimes the more confused they can become.
Oh my
You
God,
know,
yeah.
and also some of the greatest players, what stuck out for your heroes or my heroes or the people that are listening to this as heroes, is the language. There used to be schools of playing, like the Philadelphia school. You'd have guys like Jimmy Heath and Coltrane and Hank Mobley in his later years. Guys like Ziggy Vines, Billy Root, stuff like that. Chicago people, Gene Ammons, Von Friedman. You'd have a Detroit sound, and my favorite among favorites, the Texas tenor sounds. Wilton Felder, James Clay, all those guys. Real important stuff that the student has to, that language of knowing where to put the time. I tell them, as I was saying before, think of a drummer and think of his right hand on the ride cymbal. And I get them to start to imagine the sound, I call it. And I just say, listen to the dang of the sound. The dang, dang, gang, gang, dang, gang. Listen to that. And then, boo, bib, dee, doo, da. And that way, they don't have to put a play-along record on to start to do that, because they'll do that. And while they're doing that, they're also learning to play time, and they're also learning language inflection. Very, very important.
That's awesome to hear that. And it's interesting because when I was teaching back in New York and I had elementary jazz band, 4th and 5th graders, I would do almost the exact same thing. I wasn't going to throw a whole scale at them. I would say we're going to just take one note. And what my mentor said to me was, make it rhythmic. You're playing for an audience and you want the audience to comprehend what you're playing. You're telling a story, but you got to make it rhythmic, because if you just fly all over the horn, it's like someone babbling. After a while, you tune them out. It's all blah, blah, blah. So, I would play a simple lick on one note or two notes. I would tell them to take the notes of a scale, but start with one note and make up any combination of rhythms that you possibly can. Then add a second note. And I'm using only those two notes. Make up any combination of rhythms. And the thing is, you said it, you hit the nail on the head too. When you give sometimes a whole scale or too many notes at once can be overwhelming. It's sort of like if you have too many choices, it's better to limit your choices. And I was taught jazz is really, it's not just playing any note you want, it's really limiting your choices. And that's what helps you to express yourself.
Yeah, the expression is really good. One of the other problems is, again, understanding on the bandstand that you got to get a pocket, right? In some way, even if you're playing stuff that has a lot of notes, there can be a pocket there. Listen to Train play Moment's Notice. There's nobody lighting incense and turning lights out and lighting candles, man. He's burning. And there's a pocket there. There's no spirituality or anything like that. There's a pocket of time, just like when he played, rhythm changes with Miles on Olio. There's a pocket, and those notes made sense. And it really, when you look at it, there's a reason why those notes made sense, is because they were falling into this, into the time of the drummer. I was real fortunate when I was a kid that when I was at Berkeley, I had people that I played with in classrooms, like the great Alan Dawson, the drummer, who played on all those prestige records with Booker Ervin and Sonny Chris, and years later with Dave Brubeck. Also great drummers like Joe Hunt, and people like that really were instrumental in No
Yeah.
book told me that. I figured that out quick
Yeah.
because there is the swing. It's not going to put it on the paper for the student might help a little bit, but in the long and short of it, when somebody says one, two, what when your tune is counted off, all that other stuff stops.
It's learning by ear, and I think what it boils down to, and I didn't come to this until after I started teaching in public school, and I took a course for continuing ed, and I went to Hart, University of Hart,
Uh-huh.
and I learned, it totally flipped my way of teaching because it was all about teaching students how to learn songs by ear, but not I sing it and then you sing it right back to me. It's like I sing a part of it, or I sing some patterns, you internalize the patterns, you sing them back. I sing a part of the song, you wait, you hear it in your head first, and then you sing it back. It goes to it goes to back to the whole, historical thing about jazz being a language of learning by ear.
Well, my thing is I can clarify that better is, there's a certain part of the street that's been missing in jazz. And when I teach somebody something, I stay as close to that street thing as I can. Like there's educated ways of doing things. Like when I talk to guys like Ben Golson or other Philadelphians like Carl Grubbs, who's one of Coltrane's cousins and stuff. There's a highly educated human being there. But to put it to use, you have to put it to use in front of people, which means taking it to the street or taking it to a club. If you're playing for your friends, that's beautiful too. But that's not all there is. And unless, you're independently wealthy or won the lottery, you're going to have a rude awakening.
That's very true. That's awesome.
Well, it is true, like, you know, um, uh, there's a lot of things that I feel when I teach somebody something, like, you know, to hear somebody else play Green Dolphin Street, you know, gosh, I mean, when I was a kid, it was radio, and then we'd look for the records,
Yeah.
or something like that. And today we don't have as much radio, but we have more YouTube and more versions of things to check out. So it should be easier, I think.
Yeah, going off of that too, we have there are so many more resources for us today. Like with unfortunately you have to pay for it, but satellite radio, Sirius XM. Now you have a full time traditional jazz station, full time contemporary jazz, there's full time blues stations. Sometimes you get live broadcasts from Lincoln Center. All these types of things, and then there's these live streaming radio channels, where you could get exposed to some players that you may not have been able to get exposed to, many many years ago. So there are those opportunities out there. I just wonder if students are being told about that or exposed to those types of opportunities.
Well, mine are, you
And that's
know,
cool.
I give students, I have Skype students that I give listening assignments. I'll tell my alto students, go check out Johnny Hodges and then check out Charlie Parker playing the blues. And then I might tell them to check out some people that I was checking out when I was their age, like Bunky Green and Charlie Mariano and, people like that, Gene Quill, Phil Woods, Cannibal, of course. But, I give listening assignments with my lessons, and I also think that that's another thing in academia that everybody can't do everything, and there's a great job being done. Don't get me wrong, but one has to be coupled with the other, right? It
Yeah.
all like Lester Bowie said it one time, great in the '60s on one of the art ensemble records. It all depends on what you know, or maybe it was on his record, but he made this comment. It all depends on what you know. So I tell the students, okay, you're dealing with jazz history, and these are the people, and these are the people, right? That's real important, but there's people within that, to listen to too. Like I try to get them to tune into a rhythm section, listen to what the drummer like that. Listen to that. Listen to where the eighth notes fall with the bass player. Listen to the difference between Jimmy Cobb and Paul Chambers and Roy Haynes and Reggie Workman. It's real important to understand that. Or to go back even further and listen to Joe Jones behind Prez. You know, that's a lesson too, which, you know.
Yeah, it's all important. Let me switch gears for a second, and it's not totally switching gears, but what thoughts do you have to help band directors, in public schools especially? I mean, we're pressed for time. With the recent passage of like the Common Core stuff, it's been very difficult for band directors to even see their kids and, try to get their jazz band sounding really good. But do you have any thoughts to help band directors helping their beginner and intermediate level saxophone players, not only improve their jazz skills, but also like improve their tone, like mouthpiece suggestions, all that kind of stuff?
One of the things that I think is important is making sure the kids, young students, right, get the proper embouchure positions, right? All that stuff. In other words, that's a focus unto itself, making sure that the student is not playing on a board of a reed and has good reeds. A lot of what happens is, I see this all the time. I look in the kid's case and it looks like a homeless person lives in there,
That's awesome. I don't even want to imagine.
I see reeds all over the place, neck straps, pieces of music crumpled up and stuff like that.
Candy, food.
Candy, food, socks, old bags of Oreos. I'm just being funny. And so, how can a reed survive, right?
Yeah.
I look at the reeds and it looks like, I said, which one is your good reed? Is there one in there? I get on their cases, I mean, and tell them that, in a polite way. And the parents, they're doing the same stuff too, but they don't really see the case. So what I try to tell the band directors is help these kids out, show them how to get a reed guard, right, that has 4 reeds in it, and label your reeds with your pencil and pick 4 reeds that you have that are smoking, right, that sound great, okay?
Yeah.
From there, your job is easier. You're a little more relaxed because you got 4 reeds. One of the cheapest plastic reed guards there, you can buy them at every music store. Everyone's got one. And it also will help to, get the child and the child's parents into a store to see what's there, so that once they see that, they'll see other things, like maybe a swab, a better neck strap, all that comfortable stuff. So what I do is I say, find 4 reeds that play. Don't go out and buy the most, hardest reed. Try to find something that, if you start with a 2, eventually a 2 is going to get soft enough that even if your chops are tender, you're going to be okay. As time goes on, your chops and the music will tell you, maybe I need a 2.5, or, like in some brands, maybe I need a 2H. But the chops and the music will tell you. I also tell the band directors, try to get the kids to understand that you want them to practice this at home, so that when they come into the class, right, they work it out with each other. Not that they're practicing their part while everybody else is practicing their part. That'll drive the poor band director crazy, and I sympathize with them. It makes the job much longer. So I always try to, tell them, show the students some slack and say, hey guys, let's get this together and make sure when you come in, you have it to the best of your abilities. And from there, we're going to tighten it up. And in that way, they sort of get the message. And usually the kids that are in band are pretty aware, and they're listening, and if the band directors today are in an altogether very cool class of people, they're very aggressive educationally, and that'll come across. The other thing I try to tell band directors to do with mouthpieces and stuff is keep an eye on the students' mouthpieces. Just like I said about the cases, right?
Yeah.
Kids don't have mouthpiece caps.
Yeah.
They lose them. So, there's a tremendous amount of, um, in lieu of mentioning brand names, there's a tremendous amount of very good mouthpieces that you can find. And a lot of the companies, one of the reed companies that I endorse, Diodario and Rico, just came out with an incredible line of stuff, as has a lot of people. This is not a commercial,
Right.
but there are tons of things to use that really play better than ever, as they say. So those little things will eliminate those crazy sounds that sound like, what the heck was that?
Right,
You-
and absolutely, and even going off of that too, also for band directors, teaching your kids, you've got to clean out your mouthpieces, you got to wash them out at least once a week. You can't keep the reed on the mouthpiece. You've got to put it in the reed guard, like you say. I mean, I've heard stories from my student teachers about kids who've left their reeds on the mouthpieces not for like a week but for months and even years, to the point where it was just like it was disgusting. So it's really just matters of really taking care of your instrument, taking care of your reeds, all that kind of stuff. That's going to certainly help improve the sound. But one other question I wanted to ask you too, though, a lot of times we find beginner saxophone players have like a kind of a thin sound, or they're having difficulty expanding their range. What kind of suggestions do you have to help band directors or teachers help their students to fatten up their sound?
Well, for starters, there is one of the main things that a lot of kids don't do, and it's important, is hot air plays the saxophone, cool air plays the flute. Hot air will open up your sound and make it fatter immediately. So right here, see where my hand is? Like if
On your
right
throat.
there,
Yeah.
right? Open that up like that, right?
Yeah.
And let that hot air out. 9 times out of 10, as the student does that, and also in here is going to open up, the sound is going to round out and fatten up. Tell them to push like somebody hit them in the stomach with a basketball. And in other words, push that air out through the horn and let them. This is something that I used to do when I was a kid. Stand against a wall and listen to the difference. They'll never play with cool air again when they hear that sound come out correctly. Just say, stand against the wall and check out what you sound like. Just play like, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of kids play like that, like they're playing flute, right?
Okay.
And it's not anybody's fault. It's just something that just transpires, right? So
Sure.
tell them hot air plays the saxophone, right? You can also in here tell them that, and a good way to tell them how to keep your throat open and everything like that, because there's a million ways, but the best one that a young student's going to remember, it's not the most, academic of things, but just say the same way as when you burp.
Oh, okay. I was going to say throw up, but yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's this. Yeah. It's the same
Yeah,
thing. Absolutely.
yeah. It's real important. But also, too, when you put the horn in your mouth, right? One of the things Joe Viola used to tell us is say the word victory. That way you prep your victory. See, so what happens to the corners of your mouth when you say that?
Yeah.
Or in your case, because, you don't have facial hair, But when I say victory, right? Right, right like that, right? Then you
Yeah.
got victory. You're already setting things up and all that kind of stuff. That was something I've seen different words being used, but victory does seem, because you're also stressing all that stuff. Um, I think that's a great thing, like to help the student.
Yeah. I was taught initially to think the letter F, and that's kind of victory F. It's pretty similar. F, and this
Yeah,
way you get your bottom lip. Your bottom lip isn't so over your bottom teeth. It's only a little bit, and victory F. Yeah, it's very similar.
very similar. I mean, it's the same. Yeah,
Same concept, just maybe a different letter or whatever. And the concept also of, I guess, keeping your corners, you know, pretty firm to help support your embouchure and stuff, not being so loose in your corners and biting through your bottom lip.
yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing. Students, when they play in jazz band, you want them to blend and still be expressive, but you don't want them sort of like laying back in the section and just sort of, am I playing now? Oh, okay. Because it's such a different dimension than you're playing in marching band or concert band or something like that. So they have to get accustomed to that.
Yeah, because every single part in all ensembles is important, but especially in a jazz band because there's much fewer members and every part is different. You know, you have five different moving parts just in the saxophone section alone. So it has to deal with, just being confident in your part and, just bringing it out. And even soft, like even projecting your sound, you could still project your sound when you're playing soft as well.
I agree. I agree. I mean, like, look, you know, take some of the greatest ballad players, and there was more projection there than in anything. If I could say one other thing for the band directors too,
Yeah.
because I know that, like I said, all these guys are and gals are very, you know, eager and very educated and hands on with a lot of this stuff. Is try to point out to the students. You mentioned a key word, Donna, the saxophone sections. So try to get the kids to say, okay, go to YouTube and pick a tune so the kids can find it easily, and say, listen to the saxophone section in Count Basie's band when they play behind a singer on Every Day I Have the Blues or April in Paris. Listen to the Duke Ellington band play and pick a tune, Perdido or Take the A Train, but listen to the saxophone section. Isolate that and listen to how the alto and the baritones are together and how the tenors are in there. And listen to the difference in each band's sax section. If you just do that with Duke and Basie, these students will start to understand that there's a saxophone section personality they want to obtain. And you could even take it to another step after that and say, listen to one of the more modern bands like Lincoln Center, and their stuff is coming directly from those kind of bands. And also, listen to some of the bands in the 60s that Ray Charles had and listen to that saxophone section and how different that is. It'll help the kids a lot because when they want to play something a little more funky and bluesy, the saxophone players will know how to respond.
That's awesome, awesome advice. Tim, you were like a wealth of knowledge. You're so amazing. Listen, where can people find you on the web?
The best thing is I have a website, www.timpricejazz.com. If you are looking for Skype lessons, that's where you can find them. I'm also on Facebook. You can go to my page at Diodario Woodwinds and just look for me. You'll see my background and my bio, that I went to Berkeley and some of the people that I've been, associated with as far as employment, etc.
It's awesome. Do you have any projects coming up that you want the audience to know about?
Yeah, I have an ongoing project that's coming to Berks Jazz in April. You can find that. I'll be pumping it all over the place. It's with an organ player, Greg Hatza, and I, who is one of the leading exponents of Hammond organ jazz, and it's an area that I feel that is very important to keep propagating. That's coming up for Berks Jazz Festival. I have some ongoing improvised duo projects recently with Casby Jackson. We just did one in Michiko Studios in New York. I'll be doing some more things like that, and that with Kaz is live feeds. So
Wow.
people can, if they start to see that, it'll be live feeds.
That's awesome. So if you're anywhere in the world, you can catch that.
Yeah, there's two little things that are like completely different. There's a huge difference between what Kaz and I are playing, Casby Jackson and I are playing, and Greg Hassa are playing.
This is so awesome, Tim. I wanted to thank you for spending the time with me today. Like I said, you're a wealth of knowledge. As I mentioned in my introduction, you know, Tim has been everywhere, has played with so many important people, and he is an important person to himself, having written articles for the Saxophone Journal for many years. That's how I heard of you initially, reading all your articles, and I was so honored to meet you at NAMM the last few years. Tim, you're an awesome dude. I'm so happy to know you, to call you a friend, and I wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today.
Hey, thank you very much for the nice words, and right back at you.
Awesome, very cool.